evening, everyone. Good evening. Hello. Hello to those tuning in on Facebook. Hello to those tuning in on YouTube. Welcome, welcome to our program this evening. I've got Lauren Kieswetter-Bachman, recently married. Lauren, our education coordinator, joining us. How are you doing today, Lauren?
I am doing great, enjoying this lovely weather for an October day.
Yes, yes. Not a little bit of wind and rain yesterday, but today's been pretty beautiful. So we'll not waste too much time here, but want to give everyone who's tuning in this evening a chance to get logged in. Again, if you're watching from YouTube, thank you for streaming us on that platform. If you're watching on Facebook, glad to see you. Be sure to give us a reaction or drop a comment. Janice, hello, good evening. A dear friend of ours and the Historic Society is already dropping into our comments here. Glad to see you. Just a couple of quick kind of business things, as it were. We are here tonight participating in Waukesha Reads, the Big Read 2020. Hopefully some of you have gotten a chance to read our book this year, When the Emperor Was Divine. I do know there are still copies available. If you've been putting off picking those up, certainly do that. I was talking with the library today, so you'll actually be able to hopefully pick those up from us by the end of the week. And by us, I mean the Waukesha County Historical Society and Museum at 101 West Main Street in downtown Waukesha. We're going to get some copies of the book as well that are still waiting for good homes and bookshelves to be adapted onto. But I want to give a huge recognition to the staff over at Waukesha Public Library. They are the force behind the Big Read event every year. Their team is incredible. We've all had some very interesting challenges in pulling things together this year, and they helped all of us who work alongside them in events to find the best ways that we could still bring some good community programming to you. And of course, with support from our sponsors as well as the NEA, able to do that for free for the community, which is tremendous. All right. Well, Lauren, if you don't mind, I'll have you pull up the program. It's about 3 minutes past the hour, and I try not to waste too much time. I think there may be some other things on TV perhaps tonight, but this really is the best local programming you can find this evening. So tonight we're talking about Cow County, USA, but particularly Brook Hill Farms. Lauren, who just dropped out, will be in the background helping to answer questions and comments. I just saw somebody pop in with a comment with regard to streaming on Facebook. So Lauren may be able to help get you situated there, but otherwise it's looking for the Facebook page for the Historical Society and Museum. So hopefully we can get you squared away for whatever your preferred streaming platform might be. But again, talking about Brook Hill Farms tonight, and with particular attention to some of the people who made Brook Hill Farms what it was, and specifically Dr. Sobey Okuyama, a Japanese immigrant, agricultural science graduate student veterinarian who worked in the farm through the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. But to start, I'm going to ground us a little bit in the farm we're talking about here this evening. Oh, excuse me. Let me get that back where I want it. There we go. Brook Hill Farms, in that aerial photograph there, you can see the complex that really was the farm. It was not just a couple of buildings. It was a massive farming operation, dairying operation that really got its start due to the gentleman you see pictured here. That is Colonel Howard M. Green. He earned his rank and moniker in the Spanish-American War. He also served in the First World War as a major in the engineering corps. But he, in 1902, was looking for some land to purchase. He was a fairly affluent Milwaukee businessman, and he was, as others were at the turn of the 20th century, living in downtown Milwaukee, looking for some land for a summer cottage or some investment opportunity, as it were. And so he, in 1902, purchased 230 acres of land from Henry Mitchell. It was actually already a dairy farm. There was a barn, there was a house, so it kind of was a turnkey property, but of course it was not up to his satisfaction right away. And so he enlisted a Milwaukee architect, Alexander Urschwilder, to design his summer cottage, what became known as Stone Cottage, for he and his family to enjoy in the western environs of Waukesha County. Now, when it came to naming his new property, he was, as the story is recounted through several sources, he was entertaining friends at the new farm, and one friend, and sharing that he needed a name for the property, kind of brainstorming as one might do after a nice dinner with friends in the evening. And a friend of his who was apparently doing the dishes said, well, what about Brook Hill? Now, this friend happened to be Dr. Copeland, and he himself was in agricultural sciences, veterinary sciences. Well, the idea for the name Brook Hill kind of struck everyone, and it stuck. It was the best idea of the night. It was at that point that Dr. Copeland admitted that Brook Hill was the name of his favorite rye whiskey. In any event, Brook Hill Farm was born. But the story of the farm really comes to fruition in the second and third generations of the family to own and operate the property. The two gentlemen that you see here in pictures through the years. In that largest photograph, the gentleman on the left with the glasses and tie on is Howard T. Green. That is Colonel Green's son. And then to his right, with that lovely cow between them, is H. Copeland Green, Howard T.'s son. So we have the Colonel, Howard Green, followed by then Howard T. Green, and then grandson, Copeland Green. But again, it is Howard T. and Copeland who really see the farm through the late 19-teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. For Howard T., he joined the business kind of properly in 1915 after having attended preparatory school in Milwaukee, but also Ashland, North Carolina. Went to college in Massachusetts before returning home to Wisconsin to attend University Wisconsin at Madison, earning his degree in agricultural sciences. Certainly a degree that he immediately put to good use, returning then to Genesee and really ingraining himself in the operation of the farm. When the farm was first getting its legs under itself, though, in the early 1900s and 19-teens, they started with Guernsey, about 50 head of Guernsey cattle, but did end up diversifying their herd through the years, and worked and had help and support from the many other Welsh farms in the area. David Williams was one of the first superintendents for the Greens on the farm as they got started. But the other individual that I want to bring attention to this evening is this gentleman right here, Dr. Sobey Okuyama, also known as Doc on the farm. Sobey Okuyama was an immigrant to the United States at about 19 years old. He was born in Japan in 1889. And as others at the turn of the century, we see an incredible amount of documentation for the influx of kind of Asian Pacific migration through the West Coast into the United States. And he certainly follows in that tradition. Most records cite that he immigrated in order to continue his education at about the age of 19. For agricultural sciences, veterinary sciences, the United States programs, academic programs, are really starting to gain their legs underneath them by the turn of the 20th century. Europe had made some significant advances in understandings in veterinary science, but you saw programs at Madison as well as at the Ohio State University, at Cornell in New York, starting to model themselves and really pushing what their academic credentials in agricultural sciences could be. I mentioned those latter two programs because those are the programs that Doc Okuyama ended up graduating from. He attended both Cornell and later the Ohio State University. In terms of how he landed at Brookhill, though, because getting from California to New York to Ohio is certainly a journey in and of itself, but how do you find yourself in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and a suburb they're in, or a smaller town they're in, out in Genesee Township? And that has a lot to do with Brook Hill Farm itself. From a paper that Howard T. Green presented in 1955 to the Waukesha County Historic Society, so our organization, Howard T. recounted the connection of Brook Hill Farms to Japan. I'm quoting here from his paper that almost all the time since 1911, one or more Japanese have been on the farm. Yoshio Ogawa was the first gentleman that Howard T. could recall in this account. That Mr. Ogawa was dairyman in 1911. He was succeeded by Yuro Ueno and several others. Dr. Sobey Okuyama came in 1921 and worked until his death in 1953. At present time, this again, a paper recited in 1955, at present time, Brook Hill keeps one Japanese student in its employ. So even before Doc Okuyama's tenure on the farm, Brook Hill had established this relationship essentially with Japanese veterinary science students who were frequently recent graduates or looking to attend American agricultural science programs, giving them residencies of a sort, working in their facility. Trying to tell the story of Doc is difficult because, on the one hand, he is very often mentioned in records around the farm, around Brook Hill Farm during his tenure. Again, 30 years that he's there. But it is always in the larger context of the farm, trying to get at what his personal experiences has proven to be much more difficult. But we do have some details that help bring his character to life a bit more, as it were. By all accounts, it was a friend that he knew, so likely someone who was already working at Brook Hill Farms, a Japanese immigrant, who first connected him to the farm, not dissimilar to other immigrants. You go to places where you have knowledge of through others who have already immigrated. We see that in other communities throughout Wisconsin, where you have pockets of particular immigrant groups all landing together, whether that's from Scandinavia or Ireland or Wales or otherwise. But once he arrived, he fell in love with Brook Hill Farms. He actually worked at the farm part-time while finishing his work at Ohio State University. He was, by multiple accounts, of short stature, about 5 feet tall. One account said that he at times could walk beneath the cattle, the dairy cow, in his care, but that he wore a size 8 children's shoe, a size 14 children's overall, and was known for the cap that you see him wearing here in this screenshot. But his work was really in the health and maintenance of the dairy herd. You can see him here examining a vial. He worked really in what was known as the Brook Hill Laboratory, helping maintain the health of the herd. But really 3 significant contributions that we can credit his presence on the farm with are his research in artificial insemination. Ultimately, Brook Hill Farms by the 1940s will have no bulls in its herds because of his influence and his work in artificial insemination. He also worked with UW-Madison researchers and national laboratories developing a vaccine, for brucellosis, and helped develop acidophilus milk. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of those here yet tonight. But it also bears giving him context in the 1940s. Again, jumping off from the book that we've read this year, When the Emperor Was Divine, the book throws us into the experience of Japanese Americans during the Second World War, forcibly removed and interred, in camps, largely in the upper Northwest. While there were no internment camps here in our area, there certainly were German POW camps. So to say that the world as we lived it day to day would not have been affected, especially in many of the farms, is untrue. It was immediately present day in and day out who our enemies were and how we were identifying them by their ethnicity, by their descendancy. Dr. Okuyama, by many accounts, was able to find refuge in the kind of bubble community that was Brook Hill. There was lodging on site. There were at times as many as 34 men living on the farm in residence, whether they were working in the milking barns or working in the laboratories. So he was a veterinarian in residence, but the outside world penetrated. Brook Hill was one of the farms that used German POW labor during the war years. There are also accounts of individuals that hit local press, individuals who were not pleased with the continued presence of Japanese veterinarians at Brook Hill Farm, Dr. Sobey Okuyama chief among them. One account in particular recounted a Marine coming home from the Pacific Theater who, if he had not been stopped, had intentions to go to the farm and find Doc and, quote, do away with him. And so his tenure is a balance of both his finding a community of people who supported him and allowed him to be a revolutionary figure in dairy science, but also balancing what it is to be a minority and be a vilified minority during the Second World War in the United States. But the community aspect, I think, is one that can't go understated. Brook Hill Farms, as I mentioned, not only residence for workers like Doc, also would host annual picnics throughout the years. Doc arrived on the farm in and around 1921. This photograph is from a Breeders' Association picnic that happened in the 1920s. I know it is difficult to see this circuit, but I wanted to show the kind of full scope of this photograph. Those circuit photos are such interesting pieces, but I'm going to go through kind of section by section so you can get a closer look at some of the community that Doc was living in and amongst. I love this edge image kind of from the far left of that large panoramic circuit photo. We've got a couple of gentlemen who just missed lining up for the photograph, apparently. Not sure why they're hanging out in the background. But as we go across, you can see the variety of dress across some of the gentlemen. There's one young man here that you can see wearing kind of the white cap and white jacket top, very indicative of his working in one of the milking barns. As we go across, you can see there's a gentleman kind of standing off on his own there, not certain why, but he's on a platform with other performers from this picnic. You can see the piano and the beginnings of what is a clown banjo band. Not sure that they're still available for bookings, but I'm sure they would have put on a good show for the picnic. The Breeders Association picnics, and also Brook Hill had operations not just across the Genesee area, but they had facilities down in and around Chicago. They merged with other dairies to increase their production and capacity. And so there are well-documented baseball games between the Chicago guys and the Milwaukee guys. In this photograph, you can see center of the photo, just to the left of the crease, there's a young man who appears to be holding a baseball. So I think he's part of one of those teams. I don't know if he's a Chicago guy or a Milwaukee guy, but I think some of the other companions in striped shirts may yet be part of at least one of the teams who is playing at this particular picnic. But continuing across, my favorite individuals are these guys at the other end. We've got a Charlie Chapman who showed up to the Breeders Association picnic at Brookhill Farm. I do not think it is the Charlie Chapman, but a good glimpse into the fact that these community events were really just that. They were full of fun and frivolity, and not dissimilar to some of the entertainments we look for today in many cases. But at the end of the day, it's a business. I don't know if there's a more quintessential business image than this one right here. Three men at work at various definitions of desks. We've got Howard T. actually on the right in this image, working. Likely this image is coming from the mid-19 teens. There's no exact date on it. One of the things that we work quite a bit doing is reading photographs and trying to get at what dates might be. One clue in this image, besides knowing that Howard T. really started working on the farm in 1915, are the electric lights. We know electricity came to the farm in 1911, 1912, so sometime after that for those lights to be strung across. The code is probably very questionable on that installation. Those wires are a bit precarious, but that's okay. The other really interesting detail actually comes from Howard's boot. You can see one of his boots peeking out from underneath the desk, very indicative of kind of a World War I styling tall boot, men's tall boot there. But needless to say, the day in, day out operations of the farm required situations like this, as well as scenes like this one. Perhaps the more expected image of what a farm operation should look like. Now, in the 19 teens and 20s, the state and kind of face of the dairying industry was changing quite dramatically. I already mentioned the rising kind of academic stature of American veterinary science and agricultural science institutions. They were pushing, though, in partial response as well to changing dynamics of consumer expectation and farm needs. Farms more and more were being asked by consumers to ensure purity of food, to ensure unadulterated food. And Brookhill Farms really was on the cutting edge of work within the dairying industry nationally on providing clean, safe milk to drink. And that's no small feat when in the 19 teens and 20s, milk is being gathered, hundreds of upon thousands of cows contributing milk into tanks that are then distributing out by the gallon. Every cow must be healthy as to not spoil an entire batch of milk. You also see emerging regulations and specific processes to make milk that can be, in the end, certified that it is safe. Certified milk is a regulated definition. In 1911, Brook Hill Farms, through purchase, becomes a certified milk producer, and certified milk becomes one of their mainstay kind of flagship products, if you will, particularly 1917 to 1928. It's perhaps what they're most well known for. They had a visitor center that proudly welcomed you in to see the milking parlor for their certified milk. So it's also a bit of branding assurance to consumers. Not just do you have this knowledge of certified milk as a regulated product, but you can come in and watch the process. We are that confident in how well our system is working. Certified milk was also part of, again, kind of a larger shift in how dairy milk was being kind of advertised and being consumed. The removal of folks from more agrarian kind of environments, as folks move into cities, they're no longer able to go to a local dairy producer or know what the dairy is that they're getting their milk from. It is, on the face of it, a natural product, and yet it is a heavily produced product before it's making it into a city environment. And yet dairy milk is being advertised and pushed by certain public health initiatives as a preferred nutritional milk for children. That dairy milk in many instances can be better than mother's milk because it can be fortified. And dairies like Brook Hill are some of the places that are at the edge of pushing those initiatives into how you can fortify and create milk that is better for you than even the original form was. In addition, though, to a beautiful visitor center milking parlor, it also requires some pretty impressive dairy barn setups. This picture here, coming from probably the 1920s or 1930s. I know some of the ladies in the picture on the left, I say ladies for the dairy cows. Some of the ladies on the left did not stand still for their close-ups, so they're a bit blurry. But this inside of one of the Brook Hill barns. You can see down one aisle there on the left, and then the center aisle there in the right photograph. I'm not going to say I lined up the cows perfectly, but I think I got pretty close, lining up their heads to their posteriors. But the other thing this photograph shows is that for certified milk production, it's not just about the quality of the milk itself as it is being delivered. It is a top to bottom certification process. Your barns had to be held to a certain standard and regulation. They had to be pristine for your milk to be truly certified milk. And so you can see, especially across the ceilings of the barn, they're not exposed beam and rafters. You don't see dust accumulating. They are pristine, gleaming white. You see the support beams coming down, again, gleaming white beams. Even the aisles are swept of almost all debris that otherwise would be kicked around. The cows are standing on hay on otherwise poured concrete floors. Excuse me, they're standing on straw on what are otherwise poured concrete floors. The barns were swept and maintained daily, multiple times a day. In their early days of certified milk production, the cows often were kept within the barns, within their stanchions, so that they could not lay down as to not get their udders dirty. And so the quality of the milk could be assured by controlling completely the environment that the cows were in. That's not just feed, that is also what they're standing on, how they're able to move. There are some indications that some of the herd did see hip dysplasia and other issues because of standing on concrete floors for prolonged periods of time. So this was not a practice that was from start to finish exactly what was done. The farm, again, was constantly experimenting and innovating with how to best treat and manage the herd in order to maintain their milk certification. No one was allowed to step out of line. One bad milking apparently earned you a scolding, but it really truly was a top to bottom process on that certified milk. I mentioned the regulations. On the left here is a summary document from the American Association of Medical Milk Commission. It is fairly extensive, more than 100 specific regulations, everything from diet to washing routines for the cows, as well as dress for the employees. It's really the regulations around making sure that the men or women milking are wearing clean caps and jackets and pants that leads to the white outfits that are so evocative of dairying in the 20th century. The easiest way to prove that you are running a clean operation is to dress in white, because as soon as it gets dirty, you're going to know, and it's going to go to get washed. On the right, then, is a photograph from a meeting of the Certified Milk Producers Association of America. So for a regulatory body, there is a professional business association to help advocate for the interests of those producing, in this case, the certified milk that is otherwise being regulated. Howard T. served as a member of the Producers Association, as well as several other breeders and dairy associations throughout his life. He did attend several meetings where he's recorded kind of membership and attendance meetings of the Certified Milk Producers Association. And so Howard's role in this really is to be the advocate for the farm, to help network where they need to network professionally within these national organizations, and trust in his staff and residents, particularly his resident veterinarian, Doc Okuyama. But even though I do enjoy telling the stories of what things were like, I have some actual video footage of what the operation of Brook Hill Farm looked like. This footage is restored archival footage and digitized archival footage. I do have to acknowledge and give credit to a former board member of the Historic Society and their supporter, Bill Schley, for helping us in our video digitization efforts. It is his labor that makes these videos possible. There is no sound with these, so I will mystery science theater a little bit with you guys, so we can enjoy this video of Brook Hill Laboratories. Even at the title slide, I think it's very interesting that it's not Brook Hill Dairy. This is about Brook Hill Laboratories, what it is to be a certified milk producer. These films likely date to the 1930s then, just so you've got that in mind in terms of period. But we're going to start with a beautiful sweeping shot here in just a second. There we are, Brook Hill from the air. So again, you've got the immediate kind of complex of the farm there, kind of looking along the railroad line. I saw somebody in the comment talking about the train would come right from Chicago to the farm, absolutely for picnics, but also right to the farm for pickups of dairy. The title card in which is shown in this film, Brook Hill feeds the soil, feeds the crop, to feed the herd, to feed mankind. There's a little bit of the old lady who swallowed the fly there, but again, I keep saying top down, it's really from the soil on through. So starting with some horse-powered sewing here. I think this is going to be a disc tiller, if I recall correctly, coming through. So for Brook Hill, again, it is integration of every step. Sometimes, right, what we refer to as vertical integration, you're controlling the entire system and process. So this film being shot on a beautiful sunny summer day. So here, harvesting hay out of the field. Again, the tiller. Already bragging on the improved processes. So there's that truck we saw in the field, just absolutely loaded down with hay. It's actually a dump truck, I should say. So dropping off here. So they're not baling in field. They're not creating the roll in field. They are dropping it yet to be processed there as on the farm complex. And this contraption, I've got a still image of it that we'll take a look at, was the hay dryer. So you're going to get an up close look at a lot of its components here, but essentially a drum style dryer. So it's a tumble cycle for the hay to come through. But you can see the bags there at the bottom of the chutes being filled with the processed hay. So the gentleman processing onto the back of the truck there. But a normal hay drying process was not 47 seconds. So Brook Hill really showing off their advances of technology through every step of the process. So here's what their 47-second dried hay looked like. Also corn, grain feed, capped and harvested on the farm. So even though dairy is primarily where they're looking to for profit, they are also invested in controlling and understanding and researching the feed that is being grown, the corn that's being grown, the hay that's being grown, alfalfa as well on the farm. Silage is a major consideration for any farm. Getting your silos filled for winter. I have been part in very small ways of some silo days. They were not my favorite days that I recall, but working the corn. And two, if anybody's ever processed corn like that, that gentleman is not wearing gloves. Lord love him for that. I like these gentlemen too. They kind of look up and clock the camera as their work and kind of the, I don't know how I feel about being on this moving picture thing. So Brook Hill, again, efficiencies, they've got those conditions letting them fill those silos more efficiently. So that following the path of the corn as it's being fed up and down. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit. So this looking into perhaps the more anticipated laboratory setting at Brook Hill Farm. You can see the elaborate setups. We've got some Erlenmeyer flasks there in the background. So testing grain for what its contents are, vitamin content, and the hay. It was purported that their fast hay drying process retained more of the vitamins in hay than a traditional drying process did, in addition to the obvious texture differences. The machine he's feeding into here is functioning essentially like a coffee grinder. I've got an antique coffee grinder like that sitting upstairs in my house. And even soil testing. Again, from every stage, Brook Hill is involved with understanding from a scientific basis what their dairying operation looks like in order to help ensure their compliance with the regulations for the products that they're making. And in truth, they work alongside the Department of Agriculture in some instances, or work alongside national laboratories to help refine testing processes and better understand and help inform what what regulations ought to be or how they ought to be better written to reflect what farms are able to do. A little bit more testing and preparation here. We've got some live test subjects, non-human test subjects, to help ensure that things are testing out appropriately. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit here. So this getting to the mornings on the farm. For anybody keeping track, that was a 2:30 wake up. That is not my preferred morning hour. And again, cleanings happening at the earliest, not just milkings. You can see, again, the white caps, the white jackets, the white trousers. Those uniforms really informed by the regulations that they're abiding by as much as anything. Also, maintenance of the cows themselves. They were washed, they were clipped, they were curried daily in order to make sure that they were in good, healthy condition. And healthy not only for them, but also healthy as it impacted, or healthful as it would impact the quality of milk that they were producing. There's somebody's getting a bath, especially making sure the udders are clean. Udders were one of the easiest points of transmission for disease. And so exceptionally important, not just transmission of disease from milk, from the cow into milk, but also disease for the cow itself, where she would contract because of a cut or a sore on her udder that could get infected. Sterilization of the machines, again, at every stage, making sure that things are being done in a sanitary fashion. Certified milk was a non-pasteurized milk, which is the other reason it is so heavily regulated. It is, rather than being pasteurized, kept at a stable temperature, at a cool, stable temperature throughout, so that it could be delivered as technically today what we would call a raw milk product. Some milking going on. Some of the milk tubes, as the caption indicated there, had the little glass pieces there so that you could kind of see what was happening. For feeding, rations were weighed out, supplements were weighed out. There were tags at each stanchion to indicate what supplements any given cow might need. I've got more experience with feeding in horse barns, but similar things still today. Every stall's got its instructions on who gets what and who needs what. So everything very well regulated and controlled, again, throughout. So grain onto the ensilage, that being what was kept there on the farm. I want to play this one through a little bit more. So they compare the hay coming from the Brook Hill operation. So that is a traditionally prepared, quote unquote, traditionally prepared bale of hay. 7 times more vitamin A per their testing at the hay that they are able to produce. So here we see the comparison of the Brook Hill hay. Much looser, less knotted, and a glimpse at Doc Okuyama at work. So again, as the resident veterinarian, the health of the herd stops and begins with him. Tuberculin is certainly a key concern for the health of the herd, so the ear tags that they're pointing out here We'll also see Doc do some basic inspection and draws from the cow. So grabbing some vials. His milking skills, I am terribly impressed by. He is milking into little test tubes, which is rather astounding. I swear there's not a drop to be spilled on any of those, although I don't know that that's true. Doing a blood draw here, so that's the jerking that's happening. And that screenshot from the first slide that we saw of him. And this is one of his key contributions to not just Brook Hill, but to the field of dairying, is developing a vaccine for, here they're calling it the abortion bacilli, but for, and I've got to find my enunciation guide because I will get it wrong, but for brucellosis. So brucellosis for the cow would lead to loss of pregnancy, which in a dairying operation, you are only dairying so long as the cow is producing milk for calves. You need to be on a regular calving cycle. So finding a solution to this infection, hugely important to the health of your dairy herd. In addition to loss of calf, also low birth weight on calves, lower milk production numbers. So hugely important to treat on the cow side. It is also transmissible to humans. So a bacterium that you want to eliminate from your herd and from your dairying herd in both directions, both for the product that you are making, but also for the overall health and wellness of your herd. So from the barn, we'll see Doc going back into his laboratory, doing some draws into testing panels there. That elongated pipette, but kind of the oral suction pipette that he's using, and then a smaller pipette here. Doing some smears. I do desperately wish there were any audio to go with this. Some Petri dishes coming out there that he had previously prepared. Again, not certain exactly what he would be testing for, other than knowing where his primary research areas were. So we'll jump back into here. But Brook Hill Farms, again, that footage really giving you insight to what the farm standard of operation was. Now, there is a second clip that is available on our YouTube channel. It is listed right now. So go to YouTube if you're not already there, or wait until I'm done talking, or go now. But you can check out part 2 of the video that includes some of the products that the farm was making. You can see somebody testing a sample of something there. But by the 1930s, Brook Hill was one of the leaders in the country, known for their products as well as their veterinary innovations due to the work of Doc. Here, this is a brochure from the mid-1930s, the 1934 World's Fair. Advertising some of the many products that Brook Hill made. So certified milk still listed here. Brook Hill is also one of the first in the Midwest to fortify with vitamin D and be a vitamin D certified milk. They innovated what was known as a Bulgarian style buttermilk. Another innovation of theirs that is attributed to Dr. Okuyama is acidophilus milk. And you can read there if you get close enough, but I'll kind of read off the description there. The acidophilus, or acid-loving milk, is used to change the intestinal flora in the consumer, in the drinker. So change the intestinal flora, eliminating the putrefacive and fermentive bacteria, which cause toxic poisoning, colitis, chronic constipation, and the like disorders. Brookhill was the first commercial producer of acidophilus milk in 1923. So it's one of Doc's very first innovations when he's working as a veterinarian in residence at the farm. And it's also, to me, a very interesting example of what is essentially a probiotic milk food or milk alternative, as it were. I think with all of the kind of dairy alternative milks that we see today, it feels a very modern kind of reckoning with taking something as pure and obvious as milk and transforming it into something that is different or easier to digest. That work's been happening for the last 100 years. And acidophilus milk is again, one of the early examples of truly a probiotic milk or kind of raw milk alternative. You also see here breakfast cream and cams or concentrated acidophilus milk. So not everyone enjoyed the flavor of acidophilus milk. It apparently can be very tart and tangy. In my head, I imagine something in a spectrum of a very sour Greek style yogurt. My sense is it was past even that level of tartness and tanginess. So cams were the acidophilus milk concentrated down into a relative solid or nougaty form. I'm not very clear on what the texture was. I hope that it was something as appealing as nougat, but condensed acidophilus milk that could be covered in chocolate and consumed as a candy for your digestive health. So again, making those digestive probiotic supplements a bit more appealing to the average American palate, not a new invention. Now, I know, as ever, I like to pack my programs with information, so I promise not to keep everyone too long past an hour's worth of time. But one of the other products that Brookhill is well remembered for actually came a bit later in the mid-1950s. Enzilac milk. Again, it's a milk that has certain enzymes added to it in order to help break down some of the milk sugars and things that were otherwise difficult to digest. You can see here on the bottle from our collection that Enzilac milk was recommended for infants and premature babies, also for adults who find regular milk difficult to digest. So again, this is a lower lactose, not quite lactose-free alternative milk, but in that spectrum of pushing for more easily digestible dairy milk. This picture of Doc coming again from the 1930s, if I'm remembering correctly, 1935. Boasting that he is training the state's champion milk cows. He in this article it comments on how athletes have their dedicated physicians, and Wisconsin's dairy has the dedicated efforts of their own specialized physician in Doc Sobey Okuyama. Again, wanting to share some pictures, though, of what the operation of Brookhill looked like. So again, some different setups for what the milking barns were. You can see in the inscription here in the lower right corner, this coming from 1941, a Warren O'Brien photograph at the Brookhill Milking Parlor. Again, Warren O'Brien coming from 1947 this time, back in the stanchioned milking barn. You can see those long aisles again where the cows are lined along. At least one good shot of the cows being led from outside to inside. Howard T. did, as time went on into the 1940s and 50s, really started to consider conservation and ecology as key pieces of the farm's operation. So incorporating more of an outdoor life style or environment for the herd, as opposed to exclusively indoor, as had been done with the certified milk. By the Depression, by the 1930s, certified milk was a more expensive milk product, and so the farm again, had started pulling away, not just because of the development of some of those other product lines, but also from a price point, kind of a consumer connection of trying to find ways to produce at lower price points so that their milk could be more affordable. At its height, Brookhill Farms acreage, the highest I've seen recorded is 1,700 acres. It does fluctuate with various land purchases, land sales. So to give it a fixed number is quite difficult because they are such an expansive operation. And again, it's not just here in the Genesee region that we see them owning land and property, but also into northern Illinois, in and around Chicagoland, that they are owning and getting into business with other dairies in that region. This, again, another panoramic photo, just part of the larger farm complex. And there were a couple of details here that I wanted to be able to highlight with regard to how the farm operated, especially when it came to the transport of milk between the milking barn and then the rail pickup, or the bottling facility, excuse me. So again, starting from the left of the image, see one of the milking barns, and then there's this kind of frame structure half built into the side of that hill, or where the earth has been mounted against it. But you see what looks like a little rail line coming out from the side of it there, with kind of those trusses helping support. And as we go across the panoramic, suddenly you see why there is a little rail line. We have a gentleman there on a little cart with a couple of milk jugs going along across the farm. Efficiency of movement, again, efficiency a key theme for Brookhill through time. Also, with this photograph, very prominently in that image is that utility pole. So a fully electrified facility. Brookhill was known to have a tank that had an electric eye that was calibrated so that when a tank was full, it would automatically kind of initiate or shut off as needed, as it was either full or empty. So always pushing at the edges of innovation and technology as it applied to dairying. And again, the termination there of that line, you can see against the side of the kind of cut stone building here, where that rail line kind of spits out into that little docking area, as it were. The other system that Brookhill was known to have is this overhead rail line. So you can see the gentleman here pushing that. It kind of reminds me of a ski gondola, the gondola for the milk coming across there into the building. The other key adaptation that Brookhill made, this image coming from 1953, was in universal milking machines. So the next few images showing off the system that they had installed at the property. Human for scale in that picture, otherwise very similar to this one. I had promised you this image. This is that hay dryer from the film, The Beast of a Contraption. I do not know this. I'm hoping maybe somebody tuning in tonight or tuning in the future. I feel like this beast of a machine had to have some kind of nickname. It seemed just the type of contraption that you would name because it was such this monstrosity of a machine. So if anybody is aware of that, I would love to know if that's true, because I feel like it must be. But the hay dryer and the siloing of the silage on site was another area of innovation for the farm. This is Copeland and Howard T. in the freshly cemented former manure trench that became a trench silo. If you'll believe it, this attracted tourists to Brookhill Farm. Now, tourism to Brookhill had been a long-standing tradition of sorts. There used to be a train that ran up to Chicago bringing folks to check out the modern farm operation. Right? They had the visitor center to check out your certified dairy production. Now you have people coming to see the trench silo. The Waukesha Freeman covered it, as it did press coverage on it. So you can see here the trucks dumping in the hay to be stored in this horizontal rather than vertical silo. And by all accounts, it worked surprisingly well, much to the shock of everyone, I think. But Brookhill Farms, by the late 1950s, really began to feel the pressures of continued operation. One was suburbanization, the encroachment of residential onto the farm property. Howard T. was interviewed and said multiple times the price of real estate in terms of the opportunity of sale was far too attractive for many of the other farms in the area. They had not sold off yet, but he was losing the opportunity to continue partnering or buying up other farms. Also, the wage pressure that workmen could find better wages going into cities, working in industries, or even coming into the city of Waukesha and working at some of the industries here that he couldn't keep up with wage competition. There was also severe drought that really hit the farm hard. And so by 1958, the majority of the Brookhill herd was put up for auction. You can see the advertisement here for October the 13th and Tuesday, October the 14th. Ultimately, the sale of the herd, and it was all cows. There was not a single bull sold at this auction because, again, Doc's work in artificial insemination had completely transformed Brookhill into an artificial insemination farm only. Not a bull to be sold. All cows raised $147,000, more than, in fact. So the heyday of Brookhill Farm began to come to a close by the late 1950s. By 1973, Copeland had sold the remaining bit of farm. There were 13 different stakeholders over the years, different property transactions, different business transactions brought in multiple families into the deal, as well as the siblings of his generation and as well as extended family. 13 significant stakeholding owners scattered across the country. It was just an unmanageable business. Circling back, though, to Howard T. and Doc, Howard T. and his wife actually traveled to Japan in the mid-1950s, I believe 1957, the fall of 1957, and visited with some of the former employees of Brookhill Farm. There is a lovely newspaper article in the Waukesha Freeman that recounts their travels. Apparently, Howard T. would wear a cowboy hat, and he was more than 6 feet tall wearing a cowboy hat. Enough American Westerns had made it over to Japan that he used to get greeted by kids saying, "Hello, Tex." But by all accounts, they had a wonderful time reconnecting with some of the, not just individuals, but families who saw multiple generations working at Brookhill Farms. It was a 50-year relationship that Brookhill had with their Japanese employees and staff in the agriculture and veterinary sciences. Excuse me. But Howard T., the main auction of the herd happened in October of 1958. He had a sudden illness in Thanksgiving of that year, fell ill and passed away by the end of 1958. So with the end of the herd was also the end of Howard's chapter. But his legacy is certainly still well remembered. He and his wife worked to donate land to Carroll University. And so the Howard Green Research Station is still out on some of the former property, about 60 acres. He had also started a reforestation policy, largely conifer trees, planting upwards of 30,000 trees in some of the property. And so again, his work to start reincorporating kind of ecologic consciousness into the farm practice certainly lives on to today. For Doc Okuyama, his legacy as well, again, his innovations in a vaccine for I'm never going to get it right, bracelosis. That one killed me. Vaccine for bracelosis, the acidophilus milk, just hugely impactful to dairying across the country in the mid-century. He passed having never married. He did not have any immediate family. He passed in July 20th of 1953 of a heart attack. His estate was left then to the educational institutions and individuals that he had worked with. I'm going to skip ahead. He gave one of the earliest significant gifts to Madison's agricultural sciences program. By his will, by his estate, he gave a gift in excess of $59,000 to UW-Madison's agricultural sciences program. That was back in 1953. Over time, with maturation, as it matured from throwing off investment, his endowment has given more than $1 million to the UW-Madison Dairying Sciences program faculty and staff. He is one of the key individuals in helping establish the strength of that program, and to this day, the leading dairying science program in this country. This is my favorite billboard that used to be in Waukesha County. He is one of the men, Doc Okuyama, who worked behind the scenes to make Waukesha the county of cows. He revolutionized dairy science, herd management, the breeders' associations that meet in town, animal husbandry innovations, and artificial insemination remade the way that dairying was conducted in the 1930s, 40s, and early 1950s. And so for that, I'm so glad to have had the opportunity this year for our big read program to dig into the life and legacy of Doc Okuyama and into the story of Brookhill Farms.
Bonnie, thank you so much for this awesome presentation. I feel like I've learned so much more about the modern dairy production that was really happening to make Waukesha County, USA. I know for a lot of our comments that we have through YouTube and through Facebook, a lot of them were commenting about their experiences on the farm. So I wanted to throw some of those out there. Yeah. So Kathy G, she posted a lot about some of the things that she remembers and experiences, but one of my favorites here, the labs were in the town building which sits in the middle of the complex. So sharing her knowledge of the ins and outs there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, the farm, it continued, even though it was sold off. Kind of the largest piece of the complex was kind of the last piece to be sold. And it really has been in wonderful stewardship since the 1970s. And for a time, there was a small museum that was operating that had kind of some Civil War as well as some of the dairy memorabilia for view. But they have done an incredible job of preserving. I have to give a huge credit to John Checkanact, who wrote a series of 5 articles about Brookhill Farms back in 2016. A lot of this information he already dug out of the archives, which makes it so much easier.
I also want to share one more.
There were rentals. I think there were shops. It was this whole kind of, again, this community of people who came together on that property. Oh, I love this. Yes. Oh, that's fantastic.
Right. I wanted to share this one too, living there on the farm for over 10 years and learned a lot about the wonderful history from the Stevensons. So a lot of people joining
nice.
us
Oh,
who
I'm
have
so glad.
personal- Yeah.
I will make, and Lauren, I don't know, you've got the button queue up. If you do have stories or you have things that you would like to share, I love talking to folks. It is the best way that I learn about history in this area. So check out our website. It's got contact information there. Or email info@wchsm.org. You can find me there. Oh, it looks like Kathy Merrill's Forseth owns it. Yes. Thank you, Kathy G. Fantastic. Very nice. No, hugely, hugely interesting. I also want to, if anybody's looking to read more about dairying in general, I want to thank a former professor of mine, actually, or a professor in the department that I did my graduate work at. Kendra Smith Howard wrote a book, Pure and Modern Milk. She's a graduate of UW-Madison, but I reached out to her as I was first digging into this, and she gave me a couple of fantastic leads into archives, and also Susan Kruger at Wisconsin Historic Society Archives. She absolutely hit it out of the park for me. Access to places, archives is limited right now. And so she was able to get me some digitized resources to help try and get at, especially Dr. Okuyama's narrative in the historic record.
Yeah. Bonnie, because he was in residence mostly at Brook Hill Farms, is there any evidence that he was elsewhere working on other farms?
So yeah, in the Ohio State University Agricultural Science Program has an alumni newsletter called The Speculum, because of course they do. But they record him at another farm in northern Illinois right after he graduates, so in 1922. But so it lists this other farm, and the name's escaping me, but it says to contact at Brook Hill Farms.
Okay.
So he was physically located and based at Brook Hill Farms.
Super interesting.
Yeah. But and I will say too, his story is one that, again, I love the big read every year because it makes me dig into something new. I think it's one of the best parts of the program in general. It makes you dig into something you might not have otherwise. This kind of microcosm story, not just Dr. Okuyama, but this relationship that Brook Hill Farms had with Japanese veterinarians in particular, really to a fault. All of the other men that I could find documentation for, having been in residence at the farm, were also students in agriculture and veterinary science programs. I would love to understand more about how that relationship, like what were the early kernels of that.
Yeah.
I've got some suspicions that I want to keep digging in the archive for, but I don't have any answers yet.
Yeah, that's kind of where, because you're starting as early as 1911. That's kind of what's piqued my curiosity about all of this, right?
Well, and I saw another source that said 1907 for the earliest Japanese veterinarian in residence or veterinary student in residence. So yeah, there's always more to find.
Always.
All right. Well, as is usual, I have gone well past my. Usually, I aim for an hour. I've gone a healthy hour in 13 minutes. Kind of keeping track of the chat here, and I'm not seeing any other questions. But certainly hope you enjoyed or are enjoying the information of this presentation. If you are able to at this point in time and are interested in visiting us at the Historic Society, we do have limited hours during the week. Thursday and Fridays, there it is. Thursdays and Fridays, 1 to 4, and then Saturdays, 10 to 4. The gift shop's open too, but you can also come visit the museum. I'll give a little plug for some of the amazing work Lauren's doing as well. If you've got kids or you're just bored out of your gourd and you need something to do, we've got little craft kits you can pick up. Those are free for the taking. Just come in and grab one. Those are in our education center, our Waukesha State Bank Education Center. Or if outdoor activities are more your jam right now, stop by Retzer Nature Center. You can also pick them up there. They're called our Hands-on History Craft Kits, so check those out too.
Awesome.
All right. Oh, I see, Kathy, some of the photos were new. I always try and find new photos out of the archive. So yeah, to our research center by appointment if you are interested. You can also check out our website. We're actively adding more to our collections page, so you can see some of the other photographs we have in collections. Lots of cool stuff going on. So there's the link if you're interested in potentially seeing more of our collections, particularly photographic collections. All right.
Stuff on there. So.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone who joined us this evening.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. It was awesome to learn more.
It's always a pleasure. Hopefully everyone is staying safe and healthy. I got my flu shot today, so that's hopefully going to help the system a little bit here. And yeah, and everyone enjoy the remaining events for Waukesha Reads. Check out waukeshareads.org, Facebook, YouTube, Waukesha Public Library. Check out the other amazing events that are still going on.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Check us out on Facebook for more things, our website as well. We'll look forward to seeing you at our next event.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.